Dr. Angie, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers podcast today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
We were just talking about how it's so wonderful to have women representation in the plant-based world and, trying to balance out between all these amazing men we have. So we're so grateful for the work that you do. Do you have a moment of gratitude that you'd like to share with us and the listeners?
Yes, I'm very grateful for all the vegan leaders, such as you guys, and all the doctors, the nurses, the practitioners, all of whom are so active in teaching people about the vegan lifestyle and helping people understand about the vegan lifestyle in regards to health benefits, as far as the moral and ethical benefits, and as far as the environmental benefits. I feel like, when I first started, I felt like the only one in the world. And as I got on Instagram and I learned there how many other heroes out there are trying to spread the message of veganism, it just was so heartfelt, and I feel so good about it. And now I just feel like I'm part of a large team, and I'm so grateful for this team. And I'm grateful for you guys for doing the podcast to get the message out.
Well, thank you so much. It's
Thank
really
you.
amazing how social media has brought the world together and exposed the amazing resources that are available to people all over the world and helping them understand the very confusing topics that surround nutrition. So thank you for all the work you're doing. It's really
My
awesome that you're here
pleasure.
with us today on the Plant Trainers podcast.
How So you talked about feeling alone at the beginning. What was the beginning for you? How did
I
you
was
find the
at
plant-based
a
world?
conference, and I basically was talking to my cousin who's a vegan, and she asked me to go watch Forks Over Knives. She said she was vegan, and well, I had been a vegetarian for 10 years, and at that time I wasn't vegan, and I had no idea um, about the dairy industry and how cruel they are, and I had no idea about the health ramifications of consuming dairy products. Um, as I was at this conference, we were just talking, and she asked me to watch Forks Over Knives. She said, "I think as a doctor you would enjoy that." I watched Forks Over Knives, and it opened my eyes, and I delved into it, and I read hundreds of thousands of papers and literature, and I reviewed everything there is to know, and I realized how dairy is so deleterious to our health, and how much it was affecting my patients. And I decided to incorporate it into my daily living, but not just my daily living, but I also decided to teach my patients about veganism and try to get them to go plant-based for their health. So initially I was a moral vegan, but it extended to becoming a health vegan, and I decided to spend the rest of my career helping other people, go plant-based. And I just wanted to shed light on this wonderful movement.
That's beautiful. A humanizing moment, if you don't mind sharing. Did you find any health benefits for yourself when you went plant-based?
Absolutely. So, like I said, at the very beginning was for me for moral reasons, but reading the literature taught me that there's health benefits. So I started looking at, okay, so what's going to happen? Number one, I had debilitating pustular eczema, which was all over. I mean, we're talking about these ugly blisters, look like herpes all over my body. And it was so itchy that I couldn't even sleep at night. I had to take tons of Benadryl to be able to fall asleep at night and itch. I used to put tons of corticosteroid creams on my skin just to get rid of these lesions. Little did I know, so at the time, remember, I was vegetarian. Little did I know that it was the dairy that was causing it, and it's probably the protein whey or protein casein in the dairy to which I'm allergic. And I had no idea. Now, a lot of people talk about lactose intolerance and how upwards of 75% of the world out there are lactose intolerant. Who cares? You get a little diarrhea and bloating and abdominal pain when you eat dairy when you're lactose intolerant. Imagine being allergic to dairy. So I was getting this debilitating eczema, and I didn't know. And so when I went plant-based overnight, as in about 6 years ago, I realized my rash started going away, and it just continuously got better and better and better. And all my lesions were completely eradicated within 1 month, and I my skin cleared up, and I started getting compliments on my skin and how beautiful my skin looked. And I was like, what, me, skin? That was like my biggest weakness, and it became my biggest asset after after going plant-based. And my cholesterol went down. I had depressed mood, and that got better. I was overweight, and my weight reduced to more of a fitness. I started uh, sorry about that. My body became more fit than ever, and I started getting shredded to a point where 8 months later, or 9 months later, I stepped on a stage and competed in a bikini fitness competition, and I was at I was at like 14% body fat. So I gained muscle, lost fat in a short period of time, and it's all because I changed diet, because my fitness stayed the same. I actually started working out less. I worked out 25 minutes a day, and I just went on a plant-based diet, and my body just transformed. So that was really exciting.
You know, what's really cool about that is that those results are actually typical and very common for people that transition to the plant-based lifestyle. And most people think that, oh, there's just it's specific to you, or that's not going to work for me. But those results, you hear them from everybody that makes this transition, with the lowering of the cholesterol, the speed of recovery, the rashes going away, just feeling better as a whole. You mentioned before about people that are lactose intolerant, and it has always bothered me that people don't really take the time to care that they have this aversion to dairy, and they're so quick to take this lactose pill that's going to allow them to digest the lactose better when they could just avoid it in the first place. I would like you to tell us if there are long-term effects to people that are having these aversions or become allergies to dairy that are just taking these enzymes or pills to help them digest it. What are the long-term effects that they're going to see from that?
Very good question. So, Adam, there are the two proteins in dairy, the whey and casein, cause so many different allergic reactions. And I've seen people have eosinophilic esophagitis from it, meaning it's an inflammatory esophageal problem where people cannot swallow food. The esophagus gets inflamed and constricted, and the people get recurrent food bolus infections where the food gets stuck in their esophagus and doesn't go down. Furthermore, they can get what we call dysbiosis, or an imbalance of the gut microbiome. Overall, if they keep eating dairy products despite being lactose intolerant, because it's causing maldigestion. And also, I've seen microscopic colitis, meaning it's a type of inflammatory colitis in the colon that they can get. So what I always tell people, it's not just the lactose sugar that's bad for you. It also has a lot of inflammatory proteins. It can cause dysbiosis. It can also cause diabetes and insulin resistance, because the fats in dairy are terrible for you, because it contains saturated fat. And the etiology of diabetes and insulin resistance is not sugar, despite what everyone thinks. And I'm not saying go eat refined sugar. I'm just saying the etiology of prediabetes and diabetes is saturated fat. So that's also a factor, as well as the growth factors and all of the amino acid content in dairy is just not healthy. And so basically, I can sit here and tell you thousands and thousands of problems that it can cause. And so you're right. If people just focus on the lactose intolerant part, here's a red light engine coming up, and your body is like, don't eat this. And you are trying to eat it so badly that you find these lactate pills to be able to tolerate the sugar, lactose in the dairy, but you're not seeing all these other health ramifications that don't necessarily have a red light engine until 10 years down the line when you have breast cancer, until 10 years down the line when you have prostate cancer, until 10 years down the line when you have inflammatory conditions, GI problems. So my suggestion is, don't consume dairy. Read labels. I always tell people, read labels. Dairy is a cheap filler. Do you really want that crap in your body? It's a cheap filler. We have such a surplus of it in this country. It's a subsidized food. It's junk. And they have to put it in foods to fluff it up, to make it weigh more, and so they can make more money out of it. so why would you want to have this cheap filler in your body?
And then, so when people are actually taking the lactose pill or whatever it's called, does that pill have an effect on the body as well? And can that help contribute to some of these diseases down the road?
No, the pill actually helps digest the lactose sugar. The lactose sugar is a very large sugar that's in the dairy products, and it doesn't get digested very well because as humans we lose the ability to break down the lactose because we're born with a certain amount of lactase enzyme which breaks down the lactose, but then we lose that ability as time goes on. And if, for example, if you have an episode of gastrointestinal infection, just the process of aging by itself, because we're after age 2, theoretically, we're not supposed to drink our mother's milk. So we lose the ability to break down the sugar lactose. And that's because enzyme continuously goes away and diminishes. And so basically, when you take the lactate pill, it's basically the enzyme that you're taking along with the dairy to help break down the sugar into smaller subunits. And then when it gets broken down into smaller subunits, then your body knows what to do with the rest of it. But so, yeah, when you take the lactate pill, suddenly the sugar digestion becomes easier and your body breaks it down with no problem. So you don't get as much gas, bloating, explosive diarrhea, or constipation because of the lactose intolerant. But the other ramifications still remain because of the proteins and the growth factors in dairy.
Yeah, the hormones that are coming from the cow itself, whether it's been injected with hormones itself, and then also the casein in it that, the casein will help contribute to the IGF-1 growth hormone, which grows tumors, correct?
Right. Casein has shown to cause tumors. This is Dr. Campbell's work. And what they did is they were giving these rats or mice casein protein because they were trying to test out what happens with casein, with protein deficiency. And they happened to choose casein as the protein. Yeah. And they noticed that there was tumor growth in these rats. And that was a really awesome finding because Dr. Campbell's team was supposed to go to these third world countries and give people this protein for their health. And then he realized, well, it causes cancer. And then they thought twice about it. And that's where all of this came about. But yeah, it's definitely, I would say it's the biggest poison in this country. Dairy is the biggest poison in this country right now, food poison that we're consuming besides processed meat.
Yeah, so in that beautiful answer, you briefly mentioned our gut microbiome. And on an earlier episode, we talked with Dr. Will Bulsiewicz in episode, I think it was 219. We talked about the microbiome, but for the people that are listening, and we've heard this before, that our body is the product of our microbiome. So can you just a little bit tell us what the microbiome is and how it affects our body?
Absolutely. This is an awesome question. From mouth to anus, we have a very tortuous long tube of the gastrointestinal tract. And within this large, long, very tortuous tube lives 100 trillion gut microbiome. And simply put, these are little organisms that are microscopic that you can't see. In fact, we used to think that the GI tract was just a simple tubular tract without any living organisms, and which is not true. Now we know in the last several decades, we know that there's these very important organisms that live in it. They could be bacteria, viruses, protozoa, fungus, or archaea. So there's different phylums of organisms living in our bodies, and we live in sort of a symbiotic relationship with them. And within the 100 trillion gut microbiome, there's a lot of genetics, right? There's 100 times more genetics in these organisms than our own eukaryotic cells put together. So imagine how important these microbiome are to our body. Why? Because they're not just sitting there silently. They're consuming the foods that we eat, and they contain hundreds and millions of enzymatic reactions. They have their own metabolism in them. And so through hundreds and thousands of enzymatic reactions, they are producing molecules. They can help us or hurt us. So I always tell my patients, when you decide swallow a piece of food, think about what's going to happen, because that food will become substrate to the gut microbiome. And so make sure, besides being delicious, it's also healthy, because that gut microbiome, through these enzymatic reactions, can produce hundreds of thousands of inflammatory molecules, or it can produce hundreds of thousands of beneficial health promoting molecules, depending on what that food was. And I'll give you guys examples of this. Like, imagine you eat a piece of hot dog, processed food, crap, right? Like, let's just say you eat a piece of beef, or a piece of, let me give you another example, bacon or an egg. What happens is, through enzymatic reactions by the gut microbiome, the byproduct is TMAO production, trimethylamine oxide, which is an inflammatory molecule that goes through your system and causes heart problems and vascular problems and inflammation. On the other polar opposite side of the spectrum, imagine that you ate a piece of tofu, or you ate a piece of maybe an orange or a carrot or some plant food. What contains fiber? Whatever that contains fiber, take your pick. It's a plant food and grew from the ground. That food acts as a substrate and produces what we call short-chain fatty acids. And so that food acted as a substrate for the production of short-chain fatty acids, which repair the colon, which produce health and produce health in your body. So do you see how by choosing what you put in your mouth, you can either produce inflammation by molecules that cause inflammation, or health by molecules that cause health?
But so for people that have, like, I've heard this before, and it could be totally wrong, but with colitis or Crohn's or digestive issues, their doctors are telling them not to eat foods with fiber because their body's not going to be able to handle it.
Or they can't eat raw vegetables.
Yeah, like, why would they not be eating the foods that should be curing them? Like, why are doctors telling them that?
Can I just say, I love you guys for asking that question right now, because it's so, I stood up. There's this, I'm just going to call it misnomer. I mean, there are so many myths. You know how people say, like, you can't live without eating animal protein. It's a myth. You should not eat soy because it causes breast cancer and gynecomastia. It's a myth. How about, I mean, you know how we have hundreds of thousands of myths, health world and in your world of fitness, and we are constantly talking about it. That's a myth. Like, for example, people with diverticulitis are told not to eat fiber. Absolute myth. Do not eat seeds. Absolute myth. These are just, we just have to talk about it and tell us. So thank you for asking, because even doctors tell their patients eat a low residue diet, which means a low fiber diet, and half of them don't even know why they're saying that. So let me clarify, okay? So fiber is extremely beneficial for the health of the colon and healing. Like, if you have colitis, whatever colitis you have, I don't care what kind of colitis, there are different types of colitis, right? But if you have colitis, meaning inflammation, you have to consume a lot of fiber. So it's not just, so in the old days, they used to say, eat a low residue diet. And so that kept staying in the literature. And now people are saying, don't eat a high fiber diet. So let me clarify. In a normal person, never eliminate fiber, and in a healthy body, never ever reduce fiber. Eat as much fiber as you can, eat as much fiber as you want. And I always go as far as saying, if it doesn't have fiber, it doesn't belong in your body. Okay, that's simply put, everything in your body should have fiber. Every food you put in your body should have fiber. So that eliminates dairy, eggs, and processed foods, right? Even plant foods that are processed, like coconut oil and avocado oil and oils in general. So now, in a patient with colitis or ileitis, meaning small intestinal inflammation or colon inflammation, it gets a little trickier, because in a very, very, very small sector of patients with inflammation in the colon, sometimes they get what we call stricturing disease. So what that means is the small bowel or the large bowel gets strictured down into a tight lumen, okay, meaning that it closes up, right? So instead of having a large lumen where things can travel through a large pipe, it gets strictured down to a tiny little hole where things are just basically, they better be super liquid or they can't get through. Does that make sense? Am I describing it okay?
Yep.
Okay, so the lumen gets constricted, basically. And that's a stricture. A stricture can be reversible or irreversible, depending on how long it has been there. So this usually happens in patients with Crohn's disease, okay? Everybody else pretty much don't ever cut down your fiber. That's the general, that's highly generalized. Talk to your doctor. But I'm saying 99.9% of those people who don't have a stricture and they're told eat a low fiber diet, low residue diet, that should not be. And if you have questions, call me in my office. I'm more than happy to help, because I have to know everybody's case individually before I make that generalized comment. But I'm saying it's highly generalized, but anybody without a stricture, you can eat as much fiber as you want, especially in a chronic setting, if you're not in the hospital, in an acute setting. Now, people with a stricture, they can have a reversible stricture or irreversible stricture, meaning this can be an inflammatory stricture that can go away, or a permanent stricture which is scarred down and it's not going to go away. There's a tiny little pinhole opening in their bowel, and it doesn't matter what they eat, it's going to get stuck. Does that make sense? So everything has to be liquefied or it won't go through. So in those cases, I tell my patients, don't eat insoluble fiber. You should eat a lot of soluble fiber, which becomes like jello, like oatmeal, right? It's not like by the time it comes into the small bowel, it's like a thick stool. It's liquid. So I tell those people, eat fiber, eat a lot of soluble fiber as opposed to insoluble fiber. And then, but so for those people, everything can be a potential hazard, right? They have a stricture and things can get stuck. I don't care what you're eating. So they have to be careful with anything, and everything should be liquidified. I tell them drink a lot of smoothies and a lot of blended foods and high soluble fiber foods, as opposed to the plant.
Can you give a few examples of soluble and insoluble?
Yeah, so oatmeal is like soluble and it turns like jello, right? Like or fruits like bananas, say like potatoes, right? These just turn into a gel form in the small bowel, and by the time they get into the ileum, where usually strictures happen, they just get through the tunnel without any problems. Insoluble fiber, like let's just say fibrous, the foods that have that plant cellulose, like broccoli,
stringiness,
celery
or kale.
Exactly, kale. A lot of raw vegetables, for example, that don't completely melt down into this soluble form. They don't become this gel form. They still have these plant fibers in them that can potentially get stuck if someone has a tight stricture. Now, here's the unfortunate part. Doctors usually don't understand nutrition, right? So they generalize it. When patients ask them, what should I not eat? They say, don't eat a high residue diet. Don't eat any fiber-rich foods. And so that kills me, because the people who should be avoiding fiber, that's like 0.1% of the population, maybe less, or maybe a couple of percent. It should be like maybe 1% of people with Crohn's disease, but then they generalize and they tell everyone to do that. So that actually ends up hurting people, not helping people. Because Adam, going back to your question, if these foods are healing, why are doctors telling people not to eat them? Precisely. These are the only foods, these are the very foods that are going to help treat their disease, and they're asked not to because of that potential stricturing disease, which is only in like 1% of the population. And if you're their doctor, you should know if they have the stricture, right? So why is it that all doctors are generalizing this to everybody? And that makes no sense.
That's a rhetorical question,
my suggestion, right? Yeah. So exactly. So yeah, for sure. So I would say, if you have inflammatory bowel disease, talk to a plant-based physician who understands the difference between plant about soluble and insoluble fiber. And the goal should be to open up your stricture anyway, where you can eat unlimited amounts of fiber, because that is the very thing that is going to help induce or maintain remission if you have inflammatory bowel disease. I've put ever since I started my plant-based journey, I've put dozens of people into remission with the help of nutrition, and kept them in remission with the help of nutrition. So nutrition is key in reversing and maintaining colitis into remission.
So you can go from biting a carrot and having a complete reaction, and having to not eat those types of fibrous foods to actually healing enough that you can start to eat raw vegetables again and more of those insoluble fibers again.
Absolutely. If your doctor does if they do what they're supposed to do and they induce remission, sometimes it has to be, and I know a lot of vegans are anti-pharmaceuticals. I am too. I hate the pharmaceutical companies. I think they're dirty. I don't like the pharmaceuticals, and I would hate to take medicines, and I hate giving my patients medicine. In fact, I get fired as a physician left and right because people come to me and when I tell them this can be treated with a whole food plant-based diet and they think I'm extreme and they go and they never come back. I don't care because guess what? I'm not there to cause other illnesses in my patients by writing prescription drugs, right? So I don't care. I'm not an avocado. Not everyone's going to like me. And I know that I'm not going to be all to everyone. And sometimes I get fired as a physician because I'm too extreme in regards to nutrition. That's okay because I'd feel bad if someone comes back with a side effect. Having said that, there are situations where I even induce remission with the aid of pharmaceuticals in inflammatory bowel disease because that bowel is so inflamed that there's so much of the protective mucus layer of the gut destroyed. There's so much leakiness in the gut. There's so much systemic inflammation going on that if you don't put that gut into remission, you're not going to be able to just solely use plants to induce remission. So sometimes you use medicines to induce remission, and then you maintain remission with the aid of the whole food plant-based diet.
Totally understandable. There is a place and a time for pharmaceuticals, absolutely, but it doesn't always have to be the front line. So here's my question. If people are eating the oatmeal and people are eating, bananas, what about all the other micronutrients that they need? What about the other, like the vitamin C's and the vitamin K and all of those things? What do you recommend to them to be able to maintain their proper level of nutrients?
Yeah, I usually put, the fruitarian diet. I love the fruitarian diet, not for everyone, but I think that they get it right. They're getting so many macronutrients, antioxidants, and phytonutrients. I'm not saying people should be fruitarian, but most of your diet should contain fruits and vegetables anyway. Like, the vegan pyramid, at the very bottom, you have fruits and vegetables. So a lot of my patients who have inflammatory bowel disease, I say stick to fruits, eat tons of smoothies and tons of fruits and also vegetables. But nobody's goal, including people with inflammatory bowel disease, should be restrictive in regards to plants. Nobody should restrict plants. Even people who have allergic reactions, I try to start them off at a level that is perhaps eliminating certain fruits and vegetables, but then it needs to build up to be able to eat anything you want. Why? Because the gut microbiome diversity depends on eating a variety of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, and legumes. And the more of these different species of plants you eat, the more gut microbiome diversity you have and the healthier gut microbiome you have. So it should never be restrictive. But we're talking in the first month, 2 months, 3 months of treating inflammatory bowel disease, I restrict them a little bit to only soluble fiber, and you can get if you eat a lot of fruits, you can get tons of vitamins and minerals from the fruits and where you don't have to eat beans and you don't have to eat a lot of plant cellulose foods to get. You can get all those macronutrients. But yes, you're right. That is only for a limited time. And then as soon as I induce the remission and I open up people's strictures, then I very quickly increase their diet to eat a variety of plant foods where they're never restricted. So it's only for a short time. And most people don't become vitamin deficient or macronutrient deficient in the first month or two, right? It's only if they keep eating poorly and they keep restricting their diet, they would have problems long term.
So what about digestive enzymes? That's something that I hear people saying that they're taking and they can't live they can't live without, or their gut will never be the same. Is that a Band-Aid? Is that a real thing? Because I've never used that with any of my clients that I've coached through.
Well, you guys are
living.
You guys are asking all the good questions today. I feel like this is the only podcast you have to ever listen to. You figured it out pretty much. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no problem. I wanted to know digestive enzymes. Is it faux or is it for real? And is it a Band-Aid?
So again, I know excellent question. So digestive enzymes, what are they? There are certain enzymes that come from the pancreas and the body that help the breakdown of fats and carbs and proteins, right? So our body produces a very limited amount of enzymes. Now, what most people don't understand is 99% of digestion is actually occurring in our body with the aid of the microbiome, not by our own enzymes at all. So if you don't have a healthy gut microbiome, you're not going to have good digestive processes going on. So the digestive enzyme fad came into place because there's something called pancreatic insufficiency, and there's what happens is certain people have they get maldigestion because their pancreas is not working. Alcoholics, people with advanced diabetes, and people who have had pancreatitis, people who have advanced pancreatic diseases like cystic fibrosis. So pancreatic enzyme came into their aid. What you do is you get these enzymes from usually from pigs, and by the way, they can contain pig viruses. So you take these enzymes to help break down the food that you're eating because your body doesn't have it. So people with cystic fibrosis, for example, or pancreatic insufficiency, if they ate food and they didn't take these pancreatic enzymes, they have what we call steatorrhea or fatty diarrhea because their fats are not getting digested and they poop fat. So in those patients, we decided to use pancreatic enzymes, much needed, well appropriately used. Of course, I completely say you need it. But then it came on the market, and the supplement industry, as you know, the supplement industry can be very evil. They keep bottling everything up and selling it over the counter at very tiny dosages. That's legal. And they say you need people have become walking pharmaceuticals, not pharmaceuticals, but supplement pharmacies. Like people carry bags and bags of supplement, and it's like crazy to me. But anyway, they put very, very small doses of those enzymes into a bottle, and they're selling it over the counter, and they're making promises that it's going to help. Well, not really. Most of the time, people are wasting their money. If you have those diseases that I was talking about, you should be on the real big doses anyway. What's that little tiny over-the-counter dose going to do anyway? Now, people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth get a little bit of steatorrhea or maldigestion, and sometimes these enzymes at lower doses helps people get a little bit better digestion. But my question is, why not get to the underlying cause? Why take the enzymes? Anytime you reach for a supplement, ask yourself, why am I taking this? Why am I taking this enzyme? Why am I taking this vitamin? And ask yourself, can I get that from food? And if you can't, and if your body is not producing it, by all means, but try to ask yourself, and don't just crap in your body without knowing exactly what you're doing. So in people with SIBO, they can get a little bit of maldigestion. I suppose if they take these pancreatic enzymes, it could help a little bit, but it's really not getting rid of the underlying cause. Generally speaking, I have never seen any patient, not even a single patient in my clinic, who was taking the over-the-counter dose of pancreatic enzymes or digestive enzymes who actually needed it. Does that?
So it's marketing, right? And again, those extreme cases, but the general population doesn't need it. Okay, so here's another question. Yeah. In terms of probiotics, I work with a really great probiotic. It's got 16 strains. So instead of growing one big, like you don't just grow a garden to make a salad and grow lettuce, right? So it's got 16 strains. It's got 3 strains of prebiotics and slippery elm to help with the digestive system, to help people get ease in the moment, and then helping them to switch over to more whole foods to be able to sustain their gut microbiome long term. Where does probiotics fit on your scale, and how important is it? And Is it a long-term thing, or is it also a short-term thing?
Shoshana, the research is so limited on that. We don't know. When we take probiotics, we don't really know what we're doing. And I tell my patients, try to be careful, because they did one study, and this study is a study they took people. It was a very sophisticated study. Last year was done in Israel, and it was published in Cell. They took a few groups of people and they eradicated their microbiome by giving them a ton of antibiotics, and then those people, and one group got probiotics and the other group didn't, and this other group got an infusion of their own previously collected stool, so fecal microbial transplant. And they figured, okay, well, let's see what group does better. And the group who got probiotics and the group who got antibiotics and nothing afterwards did better than the group who got antibiotics and then probiotics.
It's so interesting. I wish that would have been done in North America and not Israel, because in Israel, number one, people do eat a lot more whole foods than they do here in North America. The soil, I believe that the foods that are growing there are also a lot more nutrient dense than they are here. And I think the overall lifestyle and being outside, and I think it's a completely, despite the stress that they have there, I think it's much more of a easygoing kind of society than we have here. So I wish that study would have been done here.
I know.
Do you think that could change things?
By the way, as you were talking, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go to Tel Aviv because it's the vegan capital of the world, and I'm dying to go. I've been talking to my friends who are from there. I'm like, can you take me, please? So I've had 3 volunteers so far. But anyway.
Oh my God, we're planning in 3 years. In 3 years, we're planning to go. Yeah.
Let me know. Maybe we can coincide.
Maybe we'll meet up. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Every study that gets done, it's so hard to do studies. And sometimes when you plan studies, it's hard to incorporate it's hard to incorporate every population in there. So most of the time, studies are limited and have limitations, but you kind of have to sort of interpret it and generalize in other groups based on you're right, it's not perfect and we still need tons more studies. I would say, generally speaking, it's really good to stick to the prebiotic rich foods, and because there is a possibility, and I'm totally making this up, okay? Take it with a grain of salt. This is my theory.
Hypothesizing.
There is a small hypothesis. There's a very small possibility that when you take a bacteria, if you're taking prebiotics, you're feeding the local residents. But if you're taking a probiotic, that probiotic is competing with the local resident bacteria. And there is a possibility that the microbiome that exists there does not like it. And we don't know if the probiotics that you're taking, do they actually take home in the mucosa? We don't. You could just have expensive poop. We don't know. We just don't know enough. And so is it good in some situations? Yes, there was a study in ulcerative colitis that showed, in conjunction with medicine, that there's this probiotic VSL3 helped. But unfortunately, the literature is it's too premature to say probiotics for all at this point in time. And I would say stick to the prebiotic-rich foods and don't even obsess over fermented foods. We don't even know if fermented foods are great for you. We're just
I think a lot of homemade fermented foods can be more dangerous than not sometimes.
Right. No, absolutely. We still don't have data on this. Yeah. And I'm not saying go crazy and never have kimchi again. I'm just saying I even eat kimchi and fermented foods, but I just don't go crazy over it because it could cause SIBO. We don't know. It could cause dysbiosis because it's not natural to keep eating fermented foods, right? So anyhow, I just we don't know the answers to all these questions, but the literature is basically getting stronger and stronger and more robust. In the meanwhile, I would say don't go to extremes.
So, Dr. Angie, right now, if somebody's looking to improve their gut microbiome, what would be something that they could do today to start making that change?
Good question. I think a healthy lifestyle in general. So, number one is nutrition. Of course, like I said, if you are what you eat, right? When they took the stool samples of this is a study that was done about a decade ago. They took stool samples from people living in Burkina Faso in Africa, stool samples from people living in Meridia in South America, close to Venezuela, and they took stool samples from people living in St. Louis, good old St. Louis, eating the standard American diet, and they compared the stools of these 3 populations in 3 separate, distinct geographical areas. And they noticed that the Meridians and the Burkina Faso individuals who are consuming 99% plant-based foods compared to the standard American diet people in St. Louis, they noticed that the St. Louis people have a lot more inflammatory bacteria, like E. coli and Klebsiella, and they had St. Louis people had less short chain fatty acids production, which are good for you, and basically, if you want your body to have I should say this. If you want to have more pro-inflammatory gut microbiome, eat the standard American diet. And if you want to have healthy gut microbiome, health-promoting gut microbiome, eat a plant-based diet. So that we know from research, right? And so number one on the list, eat more plants, right? Eat more fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes, and non-processed food, meaning everything you eat has to have fiber, right? Is that good? Now, that's diet. Remember fitness. Remember to incorporate physical activity into your regimen. Remember to incorporate proper sleep, put yourself in an environment where you're living with healthy people, because you share gut microbiome with your pet dog, with your significant other. I always say, if you have dysbiosis, kiss a vegan or something. And basically, use non-toxic products, like people who eat foods full of pesticides and all of that stuff that could affect your microbiome. Talk to an environmental nutritionist. My friend James Marin, for example, his Instagram handle is Married to Health. Make sure you're using non-toxic products. Before I met him, I used to Lysol everything and use toxic products all over. Now I'm switching to environmentally friendly cleaning products and everything that is good for the environment, but also good for my microbiome, right? And I go as far as saying what James would say, oh, you guys have to have him on your show, by the way. He believes in permaculture and farming your own food, like farm your own food in your backyard. And, so make sure it's all organic and make sure you have healthy soil. And when I go to my backyard and I pick fruits and vegetables out of the backyard, I don't actually wash them, because the soil, we're supposed to share a certain amount of soil. And in the old days, people ate like that. They didn't wash their fruits and vegetables. Of course, you can't do that if you're going to the grocery store and buying fruits and vegetables. But if you're raising fruits and vegetables in healthy, non-toxic soil in your backyard, don't wash it. Don't wash your tomato. Eat it. And the soil health is important for our gut microbiome, because we're supposed to be part of the environment. We're not supposed to be these super clean individuals who are living indoors and not sharing anything with the environment. And I talk to farmers, farmer, ask them what depicts a good soil, because the soil health has taught me so much about our gut microbiome. Like I was talking to a farmer, I was saying, hey, what about Candida in the soil? He's like, yeah, that's important to have Candida. We're supposed to have balance of bacteria and Candida, and when you eradicate the Candida, the bacteria overgrows, and if you eradicate the bacteria, the Candida overgrows. Well, guess what? The same thing happens in our gut. So these people who do these aggressive GI detoxes and cleanses, and they get these colonics, guess what they're doing? They're causing dysbiosis, because they're killing off a certain microbiome, and the other ones overgrow or go out of balance, right? So talking to farmers has taught me so much, because the soil in the environment is supposed to be shared with our soil, right? And it's the same thing. So I like to get to grow fruits, vegetables in my backyard and actually consume those things and share, comment. And, a lot of people who don't have a healthy biome, the question is, how do you get re-inoculated? And again, let me just make sure you guys understand. I'm making this up right now because we don't have enough data, but it's good to actually eat dirty fruits and vegetables to re-inoculate gut with the environment. And that's how you get re-inoculated. Unfortunately, you can't take a probiotic with how many million strains and get re-inoculated, because guess what? The probiotic has only bacteria, right? What about the other stuff? What about the protozoa? What about the fungus? What about the viruses? So you can never get a well balanced gut microbiome by taking a pill. You have to get re-inoculated from the environment. Sometimes that's a very slow process, and you have to be patient. But my theory is one of the things you could do is eat dirty fruits and vegetables.
I was just going to say, I'm telling the kids that they are not allowed to wash their apples before they eat them anymore.
Oh my God.
I just can't think about...
I love you guys.
No, I'm going to do it now. Everybody's hands.
I
mean, I kind of like, sometimes I rub it on my dirty shirt, knowing my shirt's still dirty, but thinking, okay, I'm still cleaning it. And then I could like not want to throw up when I go and take the bite, because we've been trained to be clean, and some of our mothers were a little bit more neurotic than others. So, I hope she doesn't listen to this one. But some of us we know what we were raised on,
yes,
unless we've had something to change in the meantime. So, but like sometimes the kids will say like, I'm hungry, and I'll say, so grab this. We'll be on the way home from the farmer's market. They're like, but we didn't wash it. I'm like, it's from the farmer's market. Any dirt they have there is fine for your body, right? But when I go to the grocery store and other people have been like touching, that's when I get a little bit like about it. Dr.
Agree.
Angie,
I agree. You don't know where you came from. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, this has been wonderful. Everybody should know that this is not even the topic that we had planned.
There's so much more.
There's so much more to talk about. If you'll have us, we'd love to have you back on to cover some other topics. You are a wealth of information.
Certainly.
We love what you're doing for the general public, for your personal patients, and it's just so wonderful to have you on the show today. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and I have so much respect for you guys. And I listened to one of your episodes with Drew about protein, and I love how you shed light on how everyone should not be consuming a bunch of protein powders. And I really, my level of respect for you guys rose up so tremendously, and I really enjoyed listening to your podcast. So yes, I would love to be back if you invite me, and I would love to cover more topics. You guys are brilliant, and your questions were on target, perfect. So thank you.
Thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, I know you're going to be speaking at the whole conference on February 16th. So we'll link to that in the show notes so people could figure that out and check you out there. But if they want to connect with you on social media or anywhere else you'd like them to go, please share.
Sure. My first name Sadeghi. So Angie.Sadeghi, ANGIE.SADEGHI on Instagram. And I have in my bio, I have a link to my website and my clinic address, my phone number. But if you have questions and you want to make an appointment, I do telemedicine actually. So 949-404-4444. And so I do telemedicine. So anytime, anywhere in the world you want some coaching, we can connect on a video chat. It's sort of like Skype, but it's actually HIPAA compliant medical platform. And we can chat, and I can talk to you about whatever you need.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the Plant Trainers podcast. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you both, Shoshana and Adam.